The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket on a cold night. This was different. This silence screamed at me from the inside, loud and terrifying in ways I couldn't explain to anyone who still had their hearing. I sat in my hospital bed, my head wrapped in bandages, watching my mother through the small window in the door. Leona Hartley stood in the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear, smiling wider than I'd seen in months. She gestured excitedly with her free hand, and even though I couldn't hear her words anymore, I could read her lips well enough to catch fragments. Wedding, budget, Noah, millionaire. My sister's name always came with that tone, that special brightness my mother reserved only for her golden child. I was 19 years old, and 3 days ago, I'd gone into surgery to remove what the doctors called a benign tumor near my ear canal. They said it was routine. They said I'd be fine. But something went wrong. The surgeon's hand slipped, or the tumor was positioned differently than the scans showed, or maybe the universe just decided that Maren Fox deserved one more punch to the gut. When I woke up, the world was silent. My mother came into the room an hour later, still glowing from whatever conversation she'd been having. She sat down in the chair beside my bed and patted my hand once, twice, like I was a dog who'd done a moderately good trick. "The doctors say you'll adjust," she said, her lips moving in that careful way people do when they think you're stupid. "It's not the end of the world, Maren. Plenty of people live perfectly normal lives without hearing." I stared at her, waiting for more. Waiting for the tears, the apology, the concern a mother should show when her daughter loses one of her senses. But Leona just checked her watch and stood up. "I have to meet with the wedding planner," she said. "Noah's event is in 6 months, and there's still so much to do. You understand." It wasn't a question. I watched her leave, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor in a rhythm I would never hear again. And that's when I saw it, caught a glimpse of her phone's screen as she passed under the bright hallway light. A text message to someone, probably her sister. "Maren's hearing loss actually saves us money on the wedding. One less bridesmaid dress, one less meal to pay for at the reception. Every cloud has a silver lining." My blood went cold. I sat there in that hospital bed, in that crushing silence, and something inside me shifted. Broke. Reformed into something harder, sharper. My name is Maren Fox, and in that moment I made myself a promise. I would take back everything my mother thought she could steal from me. My voice, my agency, my life. And I would start by taking hers. The memories came back to me in pieces as I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles that all looked the same. I had nothing but time now, time and silence, and my brain filled both with every moment of my childhood that had led me here. I was 7 years old the first time I understood that Noah was different, special, better. It was my birthday party, or what was supposed to be my birthday party. My mother had planned it at the local park, invited my entire second-grade class, ordered a cake with pink frosting, and my name spelled out in purple letters. I remember being so excited I could barely sleep the night before. But when we arrived at the park that morning, Noah started crying. She was 10, 3 years older than me, and she'd seen a flyer for some talent competition at the community center. She wanted to enter. She wanted to sing. My mother's face changed immediately. She got that look, the one I would come to know so well over the years, calculating, measuring, deciding which daughter's happiness was worth more. "Maren, sweetheart," she said, kneeling down to my level. "Would you mind if we postponed your party? Just for a week or two. This competition is really important for Noah's future." I was 7. I didn't understand futures or opportunities or the weight of a mother's favoritism. I just knew that I wanted my birthday party, wanted to play games with my friends, wanted to eat cake and open presents. But Noah was crying, and my mother was looking at me with that expression that said I was being selfish, unreasonable, difficult. "Okay," I whispered. We never rescheduled that party. Noah won 3rd place in the talent competition. My mother framed the certificate and hung it in the living room, right where everyone could see it when they walked in. My birthday came and went with a store-bought cupcake and a card she forgot to sign. The pattern continued. Piano recitals where Noah played and I sat in the audience, even though I'd been taking lessons longer. School awards ceremonies where my honor roll certificate was ignored, while Noah's perfect attendance was celebrated for weeks. Christmas mornings, where the pile of gifts under the tree skewed so heavily in one direction that even my father started to notice. He tried to say something once. I was 12, and he'd pulled my mother aside after another disastrous family dinner where all the conversation had revolved around Noah's latest achievement. "Leona," he said quietly, "don't you think you should pay more attention to Maren? She needs you too." My mother laughed, actually laughed. "Maren is fine," she said. "She doesn't need as much, she's always been more self-sufficient, independent. Noah needs guidance, support, nurturing." What she meant was that Noah was prettier, more charming, more likely to marry well and make our mother look good by association. What she meant was that I was plain, awkward, forgettable. What she meant was that I didn't matter. My father died when I was 15, heart attack, sudden and brutal, and with him went the last person who ever looked at me like I was worth something. After that, it got worse. My mother threw herself into molding Noah into the perfect daughter, the perfect catch. Private schools, etiquette classes, expensive clothes, connections to wealthy families. Noah Sterling, she'd taken our mother's maiden name at 16 because Leona said it sounded more elegant, became a project, an investment. I became invisible. I learned to move quietly through the house, to make myself small, to expect nothing. I got a job at 16, saved every penny, planned for the day I could leave and never look back. But then the headaches started, the dizzy spells, the ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop. And my mother saw an opportunity. The family dinner happened 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital. My mother insisted, said it would be good for me to be around people, to start adjusting to my new normal. What she really meant was that she wanted to show everyone how well she was handling her daughter's disability, how selfless and supportive she was being. I should have said no, should have stayed home, protected myself from what I knew was coming. But some part of me, some stupid, hopeful part, thought maybe this would be different. Maybe my mother would surprise me. I was such an idiot. The dinner was at my Aunt Gloria's house, a sprawling suburban home with too many rooms and not enough warmth. The entire family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandmother who rarely left her assisted living facility. And of course, Noah, radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than my hospital bills. I arrived late, having spent an extra hour practicing my lip reading in the mirror. I'd been working with a speech therapist, learning to navigate this new silent world, but I still felt clumsy and slow, always a beat behind everyone else. My mother greeted me at the door with a tight smile and a warning look that said behave. "Everyone's so excited to see you," she said, speaking slowly and deliberately like I was mentally impaired instead of deaf. "They all want to know how you're doing." What she meant was that they wanted to gawk at the poor, broken girl and feel better about their own perfect lives. We sat down at the long dining room table, and immediately the conversation swirled around me like a river I couldn't navigate. People's mouths moved, they laughed, they gestured, but I caught only pieces. Food, weather, something about someone's vacation. And then my mother stood up, tapping her wine glass to get everyone's attention. "I have an announcement," she said, and I didn't need to hear the pitch of her voice to know she was thrilled. "As most of you know, Noah has been seeing Cameron Sterling for the past year." Cameron Sterling, oil money, old money, the kind of wealth that came with vacation homes in 3 countries and a family name that opened doors without knocking. "Well," my mother continued, her smile so wide it looked painful, "Cameron proposed last week. They're getting married in 6 months, and it's going to be the wedding of the century." The room erupted. People jumped up to hug Noah, to congratulate my mother, to toast the happy couple. I sat there watching, my hands folded in my lap, feeling like a ghost at my own family's party. My cousin Sarah leaned over to me. "Isn't it exciting?" she said, speaking slowly and mouthing each word. "Your sister is going to be so rich." I nodded and smiled, because that's what you do when you can't hear well enough to defend yourself. But then I caught the tail end of a conversation between my mother and my Aunt Gloria as they stood by the kitchen door. My mother's back was to me, but I could see her reflection in the dining room mirror, see her lips moving. "The timing is actually perfect," she said. "With Maren's condition, we can justify a smaller wedding party. One less bridesmaid to pay for, less complexity with the seating arrangements. And honestly, Gloria, can you imagine her trying to navigate a formal wedding? She'd be a disaster. This way, she can just sit quietly and not draw attention away from Noah." My aunt looked uncomfortable, but nodded anyway. My mother continued, warming to her topic. "The money we save on Maren, we can put toward the ice sculpture I wanted. Or maybe the string quartet for the cocktail hour. Every cloud has a silver lining, you know." Something hot and sharp lodged itself in my chest. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, though I couldn't hear it. Everyone turned to look at me, and I saw concern on some faces, satisfaction on others. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and let myself feel it, all the rage and hurt and betrayal I'd been swallowing for 19 years. And that's when I started to plan. The doctor's appointment came 3 weeks later. I sat in the waiting room by myself because my mother was too busy with wedding plans to come with me, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Dr. Rashid was kind, patient, the type of person who actually looked you in the eye when he spoke. He'd been my specialist since the tumor was first discovered, and he was the one who'd held my hand after the surgery when I woke up to silence. "Maren," he said, settling into his chair across from me. He spoke clearly, made sure I could see his face. "I want to discuss your options." I leaned forward, hope flickering in my chest for the first time in weeks. "The hearing loss in your right ear is permanent," he explained, and that hope guttered out. "The nerve damage was too extensive. However, your left ear retained about 40% of its function. With a high-quality hearing aid and continued therapy, you could potentially regain enough hearing to function normally in most situations." "How much would that cost?" I asked. My own voice sounded strange to me now, too loud in my head, disconnected from the world around me. Dr. Rashid pulled out a folder, showing me itemized lists and insurance coverage breakdowns. After everything was calculated, I'd be looking at around $15,000 out of pocket. $15,000 I didn't have. $15,000 my mother would never give me, not when she was spending 5 times that on flowers alone for Noah's wedding. I must have made some expression, because Dr. Rashid reached across the desk and touched my hand gently. "There are payment plans," he said. "Financial assistance programs. Don't lose hope, Maren, we can work something out." I nodded, thanked him, made another appointment. But as I walked out of that office building into the bright afternoon sun, all I could think about was my mother's text message, the one about silver linings and saved money. She knew she had to know that treatment was possible, that I didn't have to live like this, but it was easier for her if I did. Cheaper, more convenient, less complicated for the perfect wedding she was planning. I walked to the bus stop and pulled out my phone. I had $42 in my checking account and a shift at the coffee shop that started in 2 hours. I'd been working there since I was 16, saving everything I could for college, for escape. But college felt like a joke now. How was I supposed to attend lectures I couldn't hear, participate in class discussions, make friends who didn't treat me like a broken thing? No, college could wait. Right now, I had a different goal. I opened a new note on my phone and started typing. Plan, make them see. Make them pay, take back my voice. It felt dramatic, probably was dramatic, but I didn't care. For the first time since the surgery, I felt something other than grief. I felt angry, purposeful, alive. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Need you to help address wedding invitations this weekend. Noah's too busy with dress fittings. Don't make plans." I stared at that message for a long moment, then I typed back, "Okay." But I didn't mean it. I was done being okay with the way my mother treated me. Done being the invisible daughter, the acceptable loss. The silver lining to someone else's expensive party. I was going to help with those wedding invitations. I was going to smile and nod and play my part. But while I did it, I was going to watch, listen with what hearing I had left, and gather every piece of evidence I needed to burn my mother's perfect world to the ground. The bus arrived, and I climbed on, finding a seat near the back. Through the window, I watched the city roll by in silence, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. They thought losing my hearing made me weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I found my first ally in the most unexpected place, a sign language class at the community center. My mother thought I was wasting my time. "You don't need sign language," she'd said when I told her about enrolling. "You can still hear a little and you can read lips. Sign language is for people who are actually deaf." As if my hearing loss wasn't real enough, as if I was exaggerating for attention. But I went anyway, using money from my meager paycheck to cover the cost. The class met Tuesday and Thursday evenings in a room that smelled like old carpet and dry erase markers. There were 12 of us, some deaf from birth, others who'd lost their hearing like me, and a few people learning because they had deaf family members. The instructor was a woman named Simone who'd been deaf since she was 5. She was funny, patient, and absolutely refused to let anyone feel sorry for themselves. "Deaf doesn't mean helpless," she signed on the first day, her hands moving with a grace that made the language look like dancing. "It means different, and different can be powerful." I didn't believe her at first, but after 4 weeks of classes, I started to understand. Sign language gave me back something I'd lost, the ability to communicate fully without constantly asking people to repeat themselves or feeling like a burden. In that classroom, everyone signed. Everyone understood. No one treated me like I was broken. That's where I met Marcus. He was 23, worked in it, and had been born with progressive hearing loss that had taken most of his hearing by the time he was 18. He was also the cousin I'd barely spoken to at family gatherings, the one who always sat in the corner with his phone, avoiding the chaos. We started talking, signing, really, after class one night. He'd noticed me struggling with a particular sign and came over to help. "You're Maren Fox, right?" he signed. "Leona's daughter." I nodded, tensing automatically. Family connections meant judgment, meant people taking my mother's side. But Marcus just shook his head. "Your mom's kind of terrible," he signed bluntly. "No offense." I laughed, actually laughed for the first time in weeks. "None taken," I signed back. "She is." We started getting coffee after class, sitting in quiet corners where we could sign without people staring too much. Marcus taught me shortcuts, helped me practice, made me feel less alone. And one night, about 6 weeks into our friendship, I told him everything. We were sitting in a 24-hour diner, picking at fries neither of us wanted, and I just broke, signed everything I'd been holding in. The surgery, the text message, the family dinner, the way my mother was using my disability to justify cutting costs for Noah's wedding. Marcus's face darkened as I signed. When I finished, he sat back and stared at me for a long moment. "You need to document this," he signed. "Everything. Every conversation, every text, every moment where she treats you like you don't matter. Because Maren, what she's doing isn't just mean, it's abuse." The word hit me like cold water. Abuse. I'd never thought of it that way. My mother didn't hit me, didn't scream at me. She just ignored me, dismissed me, made me feel small. But Marcus was right. It was abuse. Emotional, calculated, cruel. "How?" I signed. "How do I document it?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm a tech guy, remember? I can help you set up recordings, show you apps that transcribe conversations, teach you how to back everything up so she can't delete it." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "But Maren, you need to understand, if you do this, if you gather evidence and expose her, there's no going back. Your family will never be the same. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my mother's smile at the hospital, about the wedding invitation addressing party she'd made me attend, where I'd spent 4 hours writing names on envelopes while Noah tried on tiaras. About Dr. Rashid's kind face telling me I could get better if only I had the money my mother was spending on ice sculptures. "Yes," I signed. "I'm ready." Marcus nodded and started typing on his phone. "Okay then, let's burn it all down." The first real test came at Noah's engagement party. My mother had been planning it for weeks, a garden party at some country club with 200 guests, a live band, and enough champagne to float a small boat. She'd hired a professional event coordinator, insisted on a specific color palette of blush and gold, and spent more on flowers than I made in 6 months. I wasn't supposed to go. My mother had gently suggested that I might be more comfortable staying home, that large social events might be overwhelming for me given my condition. What she meant was that she didn't want me there, didn't want to explain to her wealthy friends why one daughter was damaged goods, while the other was marrying into oil money. But I went anyway. I showed up in a simple blue dress I'd bought at a thrift store, my hearing aid carefully positioned, my phone in my purse with the recording app Marcus had installed already running. My mother's face when she saw me was priceless. Shock, anger, and something that might have been fear all flashing across her features in quick succession. "Maren," she said, pulling me aside before I could enter the garden. "What are you doing here?" "It's my sister's engagement party," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I wanted to celebrate with her." "But I thought we agreed." "You suggested," I interrupted. "I never agreed." Something cold settled into my mother's eyes. She smiled, but it didn't reach anywhere near her face. "Fine, but please try not to make a scene. This day is about Noah." "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't dream of taking attention away from her." The party was exactly what I'd expected. Excessive, showy, designed to impress. Noah held court in the center of the garden, her ring catching the sunlight every time she moved her hand, which was often. Cameron stood beside her looking vaguely bored but dutiful, shaking hands and accepting congratulations like a prince greeting his subjects. I stayed on the edges, watching, listening with my partially functioning ear, reading lips when I could. Most people ignored me, which was perfect. It meant they didn't notice when I positioned myself near interesting conversations. That's how I overheard my mother talking to the wedding planner. They were standing by the champagne fountain, reviewing details on a tablet. The planner was a thin woman in her 50s who kept nodding anxiously at everything my mother said. "The thing about Maren," my mother was saying, her back to me, "is that she's always been difficult, needy. The hearing loss is just the latest in a long line of problems she's created for this family." My hand tightened around my champagne glass. "So you want to minimize her role in the wedding party?" the planner asked. "Exactly. Seat her at the back, maybe with some distant relatives. Keep her away from the main photography. The last thing we need is wedding photos where she's looking lost and confused, ruining the aesthetic." "And the bridesmaid dress?" "We'll order one, but honestly, Patricia, I'm hoping she'll bow out on her own. She must know she'll just be in the way." The planner looked uncomfortable, but made notes on her tablet. "Whatever you think is best, Leona." I stood there, my champagne untouched, and felt that familiar rage building in my chest. But this time, I didn't run to the bathroom to cry. This time, I pulled out my phone and checked that the recording app had caught every word. It had. I moved through the party after that like a ghost, collecting evidence. I recorded my aunt making jokes about my disability, caught my uncle saying it was probably for the best that I couldn't hear, because then I wouldn't have to listen to all the boring wedding talk. Watched my mother guide Noah through the crowd while literally stepping around me like I was furniture. But the best moment, the one that made all of it worth it, came near the end of the night. I was standing by the dessert table when I noticed Noah talking to one of her bridesmaids, a girl named Ashley I vaguely remembered from high school. They were drinking champagne, their faces flushed, their guard down. I couldn't hear them clearly, but I could read Noah's lips well enough to catch the important part. "Honestly," Noah said, It's kind of convenient that Maren can't hear anymore. Mom doesn't have to pretend to care about both of us. She can just focus on me and the wedding without feeling guilty." Ashley laughed, and I felt something inside me crack and reform, harder than before. I took out my phone, started recording, got every word. When I left the party an hour later, my mother barely noticed. She was too busy accepting compliments on what a beautiful event she'd thrown, how lucky she was to have such an amazing daughter. One daughter, anyway. I walked to my car in the parking lot, got in, and sat there for a moment in the silence that was my constant companion now. Then I opened my phone and sent Marcus everything I'd recorded. His response came back immediately. "Holy shit, this is even worse than I thought. Keep going, we're building a case." I smiled in the darkness of my car. My mother thought she'd traded my hearing for Noah's perfect wedding. She had no idea what she'd actually traded it for. I became a shadow in my own family's house. My mother had temporarily moved me back home after the surgery, saying I needed support during my recovery. What she really meant was that she needed free labor for wedding preparations and didn't want to pay for professional help. So I lived in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters I'd put up when I was 12, and spent my days addressing invitations, assembling favor boxes, and pretending I didn't notice the way my mother spoke about me when she thought I couldn't hear. But I could hear. Not well, not clearly, but enough. And what I missed with my ears, I caught with my eyes. I learned to read the room in ways hearing people never do. I watched body language, facial expressions, the way people's shoulders tensed when they lied. I became fluent in the language of unspoken cruelty. And I recorded everything. Marcus had set me up with a sophisticated system, voice-activated apps that ran continuously on my phone, discrete cameras I could clip to my shirt collar, transcription software that turned conversations into searchable text. My laptop became a database of my family's worst moments, organized by date and categorized by offense. Favoritism, manipulation, gaslighting, neglect. The evidence piled up like snowdrifts. One afternoon, about 3 months before the wedding, my mother called me into the living room. Noah was there too, lounging on the couch with her laptop, probably shopping for more things she didn't need. "Maren," my mother said, and I could tell from her tone that I wasn't going to like what came next. "We need to talk about the wedding." I sat down across from them, my phone recording in my pocket. "The thing is," my mother continued, "we've been reviewing the budget and we're a bit over where we wanted to be, so we're making some cuts." I waited, knowing what was coming but wanting to hear her say it. "We think it would be best if you weren't in the wedding party," she said. "Just as a guest, it would be simpler, less stressful for everyone." "Less stressful for you, you mean?" I said quietly. My mother's smile tightened. "This isn't about me, Maren. It's about what's best for Noah's special day. And honestly, with your hearing issues, coordinating with the other bridesmaids would be difficult. The photos would be complicated. You understand, don't you?" What she meant was, you'll ruin the aesthetic. You'll be a burden. You don't belong in your sister's perfect day. "What if I paid for my own dress?" I asked, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. "What if I promised to stay out of the way?" Noah looked up from her laptop for the first time. "Maren, don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's already been decided." "By who?" I asked. "When did anyone ask me what I wanted?" "This isn't about what you want," my mother snapped, and there it was, the truth she usually kept hidden under layers of false concern. "This is Noah's wedding, her day. For once in your life, can you please not make everything about you?" I stared at her, at this woman who'd given birth to me but had never actually seen me. And I felt something settle in my chest, cold and final. "You're right," I said, standing up. "This is Noah's day. I wouldn't want to ruin it." My mother looked relieved. "I'm so glad you understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you'd rather spend money on ice sculptures than on helping your daughter hear again. I understand that you see my disability as a budget convenience. I understand that you've never actually loved me, not the way you love her." I pointed at Noah, who was still sitting at the head table, tears running down her face. I loved you, I continued, my own voice breaking now. I loved you, and I tried so hard to make you love me back, but nothing was ever enough. I was never enough. Maren, my mother started. No, I said, I'm done listening to you. I'm done being quiet while you pretend to be Mother of the Year. Everyone here just saw the truth. They saw the texts, heard the recordings, watched the evidence. They know what you are now. My mother looked around at the crowd, at the faces that had turned from sympathetic to horrified, and I watched something in her break. Get out, she said quietly. Get out of this wedding right now. Gladly, I said. I grabbed my purse and walked toward the exit, but just as I reached the door, I turned back one last time. See you at the actual wedding, Mom, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. I promise you'll never forget it. The look of dawning horror on her face told me she finally understood. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I had 3 months until the wedding, 3 months to perfect my plan, 3 months before I showed all of them, exactly what it cost to make me invisible. And I was going to make every single one of those days count.